Welcome to Target Success. Our weekly cable television program brings us guests from the fields of education, business, government, and economic development. Today we have with us the President of Niagara County Community College, Dr. James Klyczek. Welcome, Dr. Klyczek.
Hi, Jerry.
Very happy to have you today as our guest. It's been a while since you really have been on our program, and during that time you've gone through a tremendous new development, and tell us about it. The first thing I can remember was just a discussion about having a Culinary Institute in the hotel in downtown Niagara Falls. That was sort of approved and was starting to happen to the hotel. Actually, the people who own the hotel, the property went up for sale, and I believe they took a bankruptcy. So suddenly there was a change, and there was a period of time where you were working, let's say, under the clouds and developing a new site. Tell us about that.
There have been a lot of developments, there have been a lot of changes in the project. It's been around a long time. What began as really a living learning lab for the culinary students in terms of opening up a restaurant has mushroomed into a much larger, more developed project. And the last time we talked when we were working on the project at the Crown, it was developing even further. We had worked with Barnes & Noble to come into the program, and the academic areas of the hospitality and tourism area were expanding. The developments at the Crown we were very close to signing a lease agreement, a long-term lease agreement, which would have been a combination of leasing space within the hotel, first floor of the hotel, for the restaurant and a pastry/deli operation, and a small Barnes & Noble. As we were just close to signing that lease, the hotel got into financial difficulty. The owner of the hotel got into financial difficulties. The hotel itself was still doing very well. It still does today, a couple of years after this process. And at some level, we still regret that we were so close to signing that lease. Had we signed it, we'd be up and running and open, and the program would be doing very well. The hotel is still doing very well. It's under new ownership at this point. But at some level, we're pleased that it didn't happen because the project grew even more. And as you know, now we're working on the old Rainbow Center Mall. What, as I said, began as a restaurant operation, grew at the Crown Plaza to about a 40,000 square foot operation, is now between 80 and 90,000 square feet. So it's come a long way in several years. Much too much development time for many of us, very impatient. On the other hand, I think, and you've noted too, the community has really gotten behind the project, and both sides of the political field are involved in it and supporting it, and so we think it's become an even better project.
But you ended up receiving the largest gift that the College Foundation ever had received, and that you worked through that. That was not somebody just walking up to you saying, I want to give you this. You developed that relationship, and tell us about that, only because that relationship was not good with the city of Niagara Falls, and you sort of turned that 100% around.
I think we have this innate ability at the college to step into stuff, both positive and negative. And this was a case of something that in the city, as we had looked at properties when the Crown, even prior to settling on the Crown, we looked at a number of properties that the program could be housed in. When the difficulties arose at the Crown and we weren't able to enter into the legal agreement, we continued to search, as you know, for all over the inner core of the casino district and the Niagara Falls master plan. The mall had interestingly been one of the very, very first areas we looked at. The Winter Garden was still there in, I think, 03, 04. But it was kind of off limits. There were issues between the leaseholder on the mall, the Cordish company, and the city. There were issues about what was going to happen with the Winter Garden. This was even before Joe Anderson bought it, turned it around, and then it was sold back to the city. And so we moved away from the mall property. It didn't seem feasible at all. And we had never dealt with David Cordish directly, the owner of Cordish Company, but with his representatives. And so at that point, just to throw a number out, they might have wanted $20 to $30 a square foot for a lease. And even back in 03, 04, the mall was in rough shape, having been empty a couple of years already. So we moved away from that. Several years later, as you know now, we pursued the mall again at the suggestion of City Council Chair Sam Frashone. So why don't you look at it? And we explained the situation. He was familiar with it. Frankly, he made a call to David Cordish, kind of opened the door. David Cordish called me and we started discussions. And this is probably now late 2008, 2009. Explained the situation. He was interested. He had been holding on to the mall because he, as he described it, had a fondness for Niagara Falls. It was a great property when they built it. It was very successful for a number of years, as you know. And then with the change in the economy and the exchange rate and all those kinds of things between Canada and the U.S., the property just couldn't support itself anymore. I understand he tried a number of options for vendors to have free rent or some share of gross proceeds to keep the mall operating, and it just wasn't able to sustain itself. We went out to Baltimore to meet with David probably 3 or 4 times, and each time we talked, he asked more questions and got more interested in the project. Some of our initial discussions were about simply leasing a third of the mall, and he had development ideas on the remaining 2/3. As our discussions progressed, the city got interested because at that point we were kind of stepping on toes because the city has the long-term lease with the Cordish Company. But the city council was pretty interested in getting something done. We had been working with Chris Shefflin for a while at USA Niagara. They had certainly wanted to get something done with that property. It's an enormous property right in the center of the district. But I think everybody threw their hands up. And even in the best of worlds, everybody trying to make something happen, it just wasn't coming together. David thought about our project some more. He had sent some of his folks out to meet with us. And over about 1.5 years, we developed a nice relationship. He really valued what we were doing. He understood, you know, the community college versus a university and in terms of what we were trying to achieve with our project. Given that we had identified part of our project as entertainment and the tourism and being right in that district is certainly one of the major companies or subsidiaries of the Cordish Company. So he sent some of those folks in to look at what we were doing. And finally, probably too long a story already, but at one night David called and said, I really like what you're doing. I think it's got huge potential and I'd like to give you the mall. And then I described at our press conference last year how that kind of shook out over several days and more meetings. And interestingly, it worked out for all parties. He had tried everything he could. He had a very long-term lease, I think maybe 50 years, 45 years yet, remaining on that property. And so what he ended up doing is turning over that long-term leasehold agreement to the foundation, who receives all gifts for the college, as well as the property across the street, which was not a leasehold agreement, it was a property agreement in total, ownership in total. That was the former balloon launch people were familiar with across the street. We worked with USA Niagara, Mayor Deister's economic development people, worked with our board to understand how this would work, the foundation board, and eventually it all came together that Mr. Cordish donated the entire leasehold agreement and the property across the street to the foundation. The foundation gave the entire property, the leasehold agreement and the property across the street, fee simple deed I think it is, to the city, in exchange for the city giving us free title, clear title, to 1/3 of the mall. And what's difficult for some people to understand is Mr. Cordish had, I think, overall a 75-year leasehold agreement. And some people would say, well, that's just a lease. What did he give you? He gave you his lease. What he gave us, though, was the leasehold agreement, long-term leasehold agreement to that property that ultimately was valued at several $1 million. And so for the city's purposes, they got the mall back. And you know there had been legal issues between the city and the Cordish Company about the mall was empty, so he wasn't filling it, and the city didn't maintain it, so he couldn't fill it. It turned out to really be a great union and everything coming together with the city getting its mall back, the college ultimately getting 1/3 of the mall, fee simple deed, the city also getting a valuable piece of property, probably worth $1.75 million, the balloon launch section for free development. In exchange, USA Niagara came to the table and gave us $4.3 million. So in the end, the city got its mall back. The city got an investment from USA Niagara of about $10 million to renovate the ramp. The college ultimately got a third of this mall, fee simple deed. USA Niagara got development rights to the other 2/3 of the mall and an acre of land across the street. And the foundation served as the transition body or legal entity to receive the largest donation it's ever received, and probably the largest donation of community colleges in the state, to serve both the city purposes, USA Niagara, Empire State development purposes, and the colleges. So I can't imagine that there's been a better deal in the city in many, many years. Everybody's so used to things falling apart or not working or not developing. And while there's probably certainly larger deals in other parts of the state, I think for us, everybody was so excited they didn't believe it was happening.
Well, certainly the credit has to go to you for, one, bringing all these people together to sit at the same table, some not even talking to each other for many years, and getting them to agree on this project. I think that's where the credit really lies with this. And I know I wanted our listening audience to hear that story because it took you over 3 years to bring this about. We're not there yet, but we're going to talk about the new facility and construction. But I think those steps that you're taking now are a lot easier than the 3 years of negotiation and the meetings and the hours put in. And you're not an attorney, but I think you probably now feel you learn more legal ramifications at putting a deal together like this. Not only the real estate changes, just the legal changes between the different types of documents that had to be signed by all these parties. You left out, I think, the county and the IDA because they were part of it too.
They were both part of it. The IDA had done some kind of financing early on, or whether it was tax exempt or not, I'm not sure. But the IDA had a role. Our foundation had a role. The College Board of Trustees, the City of Niagara Falls, the Urban Development Area or Committee of the City, the Planning Department, USA Niagara, Empire State Development, certainly the county, because ultimately community colleges don't own their own land, the county owns it. And that was a hurdle too, to get 19 legislators to understand the importance of the deal, which they understood that relatively quickly, and they did value what this would mean. On the other hand, at one phase of this, the county was looking at accepting liability to this enormous gray elephant, whatever you want to call it, this monstrosity that had been vacant and fallen in disrepair. And so you can imagine there were a few considered worries on the part of those legislators. In the end, it came together. Probably the person who ultimately worked hardest and made this happen at the end of the day is really David Cordish. If I could call this thing the Cordish Center, I would call it that in a minute. And interestingly, you know, everybody now in the end wants their share of it and their involvement. And Mr. Cordish is the last person that wants anything to do with it, in the sense of it was something good, he felt it was needed, and he participated. And you know as well as I do, there are still naysayers about this. Will it really open, and will it really happen? You're right, we learned a lot about the legal process. I think the final closing on a home when you buy it is ridiculous, you know, stacks of papers. This one was at least 2.5, 3 inches thick, and probably involved a dozen attorneys. So it was amazing. But everybody stepped to the plate, from Henry Sloan at IDA to Bill Ross at the legislature to majority and minority leaders on the legislature. It was really kind of interesting in the end to see it happen. During the process, it was pretty torturous.
Now, let's move on. You've been involved with demolition, asbestos control, and cleaning up the property, and now that's finished, and now you're into construction. Tell us about that.
We finished the demolition in late July, early August on our part of the mall, and the priority with the demolition contractor was starting on the south end, Old Fall Street, where we'll be, and moving northward in the interior of the mall. So they finished our area in late July. In late August, they were wrapping up the north end of the mall interior. And you're right, it was pretty extensive in terms of everything from mold and asbestos abatement, the usual. The place was empty a long time. all the way to working on several different contractors. We have Simonelli as our construction management firm, and Cannon as our architecture and engineering firm. This USA Niagara hired Simonelli as Cannon as a construction management firm for the ramp project, and I'm not sure who's doing the actual construction. But during several phases between May and September, there have been several people at the table playing different roles and getting us in there. And it wasn't until late August that you could walk through there and look at this, the legal term I guess is broom swept or swept clean property when the demo was done. And in a way, different people were able to see different things, although frankly at that point it just looked like an empty ramp. Everything was gutted. For me it was a little difficult because I had gotten so used to the mall itself and the storefronts and imagining all of our design with our program people and our architects, that everything was in reference to something there. That when it was all gone, it was like trying to plan a deck in your backyard lawn, you know, a multi-tiered deck and not having anything there. As we moved into September, the project started the actual construction, and now we're actually having some steel go in. So in a way it was darkest before the dawn. There was the mall, the interior was demolished, work on the ramp began, and then finally we were able to do our phase one, which is really a little bit more of demolition in terms of some of the steel and concrete, but then the addition of closing in some floor areas and reworking that huge third floor front area, the glass cube everybody calls it, the multi-tiered glass structure on the front. A lot of work had to be done there, and that's where we're at now. Now we'll be moving into phase two, which is a lot of the civil engineering, the utilities, and the major HVAC infrastructure kind of stuff going in.
Opening day.
We're looking for, I think tentatively our move-in date is August 16th, 2012. But that is a certificate of occupancy, which will allow us to get the faculty in there to really do the testing of all the equipment and all that kind of stuff. So we're still cutting it close for a September 1st opening day of classes.
It's amazing because it's not just the work that's being taken place at the center, it's also all the equipment and supplies and materials that you had to order, and there's order times, and I know in speaking with Mark Mastriner, that's been going on for 2 years in the design and ordering, and then you have to get it assembled. And
it's almost analogous to planning your wedding. If you remember doing that 1,000 years ago, and you're in love with this person and you're planning this wedding, it's all going to be wonderful, and then you get to what color are the napkins, and are there long tablecloths or short one, and what kind of wine and all that stuff. And that's kind of what's happened at the planning table every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock for months now, with the architects, the engineers, the construction management people, and our people. And you get into these huge arguments about timing and this and that. And you're right, this is like, in some ways, it's like building a home, but your home has 23 kitchens and 15 bathrooms. So those are the worst things to design in your home. But like planning that wedding, you're fighting tooth and nail, and everybody's working hard to make it happen. In the process, you know, you kind of come out after every meeting, you know, wiping your brow and saying, well, we got through another 2 hours of this. But it's great, everybody's headed in the same direction.
What would we be telling our listening audience that they could look forward to in seeing in the new center?
What we envision is, as you come in off of Old Falls Street, and they're kind of used to the front of the structure now, we're enlarging the entranceway, but as you come in off of that courtyard on Old Falls Street and the cobblestone, you'll enter something similar in the atrium. We've tried to maintain the atrium as it is, with on the south end a 45-foot ceiling. As you head toward the middle of the mall, where people will remember the fountain and the elevator is still there, and a modified fountain, are 85-foot ceilings. So we're still trying to maintain that atrium view in the glass. It will feel like an exterior courtyard, with the retail entities coming off of that, the Barnes & Noble, which has now grown to a couple thousand square feet, a pastry shop, a separate deli, so those entities separated, they were together at the Crown. The restaurant has been expanded, an exhibition kitchen. We've also added a wine boutique and a new mixology lab, And so when you walk into this atrium, it will feel like you're in an exterior courtyard, and they have all these retail entities. As you move toward the back end of the property, you'll be entering the school, and it will feel more like classrooms and labs and so on, all that. So we moved it to the first floor, and part of what we hope to reproduce is a large theater-type lecture room that will also be a TV studio to tape chefs coming in and all of that, but as well to kind of reproduce, remember the days of the Festival of Lights, and in that one building we had the theater where there was constantly something going on, people could come through, and we envision the school being used in that way for the community, both for the city and the county, that it's a public entity where we want the public to come in, and that we're part of that community as the community's college. And so that something as simple as trying to include the details of how are we able to run public, not public movies, but use that theater space for public purpose, all the way back to what we're working on now, being a part of the holiday market in Niagara Falls, and opening our building up to the public for events like that as well. So they'll come in, it'll be a courtyard feel, retail entities year-round. Then you enter the school area. The second floor is all labs and lecture rooms. And the third floor is a library, a computer classroom, and a conference room.
Originally, I remember looking at the drawings probably 2 years ago, and there was an ice room, and I don't know if that's still there, and that ice room was going to be a place that your instructor could be teaching restaurateurs, students, how to carve chunks of ice into these beautiful, beautiful displays.
John Matwico is on our faculty. John is an expert master ice carver. That was one of the additions that we were able to bring into this program. In a sense, not only did Mr. Cordish's donation help us to get the physical property and all the legal work and the ability to get that for free, but it gave us extra space and we were able to reserve some of our cash, our funding for these other pieces. And I mentioned the wine boutique, working with the wine trail, but on the ice lab will allow us to train local chefs in that particular art. And John is great. He does a lot of this in his own business, plus he's a full-time faculty and teaches for us. Our students going through our program will have the ability to take that extra course as part of their curriculum, just like work in the wine boutique in our winery operations program. The graduates of our program will have unique skill sets that will allow them to market themselves very differently. As well, everything in this building has glass walls, basically. So it's, if you remember the Krispy Kreme approach to walking in and seeing all that equipment and machinery and the donuts, we're reproducing that in all of our labs and all of our entities, that tourists coming through will be welcome, and the doors will be wide open for people to come through, see what we're doing in each of the labs. Large exhibition kitchen, and you've pointed out an important area because it's, in some senses, it's a frill, but it's great to have because it will give students skill sets that will help market themselves. We started off with about 125 students when we began talking about this and planning it. As we got halfway through, so I'll say about 2-3 years ago, we jumped up to 200, 225. Now we're at almost 400 students. Part of that is the press that we've gotten as this has developed and gotten more interest. Students from the Southeast are coming up to be a part of this program. And in fact, the students now enrolling this fall will be the first graduates in 2 years from this program as we move over next year. So the enrollment has grown already much more than we anticipated. The planned enrollment is close to 1,000 students at this entity in hospitality and tourism. And that's everything from baking and pastry certificate and degree to culinary arts to casino to hotel management to hospitality operations, winery operations, and so on, banquet and catering. So the project expanded, as we said, and now we're looking at about 1,000 students.
And the casino, you have a good relationship with them?
We had just finalized our agreement. They had pledged $1.275 million to this project. Some of that money is a restricted endowment with the foundation for scholarships for Native American students to come into the program in any of our hospitality and tourism degree or certificate programs. Some of that money is participating in a exhibition we have within the center that will be a part of the tourism exhibit, to introduce people to the wine trail, to all the tourism places we have in Niagara County, whether it's the canal and the locks in Lockport, all the way into Erie County, and the kinds of cultural entities we have available. The casino is also sponsoring the Baking and Pastry Lab and allowed us to almost double the size of that lab. We will be working with the casino to provide all their baking and pastry needs. It also allows us to fulfill the economic development part of our mission, which is everything from retraining displaced homemakers to come into that baking and pastry lab and be the nighttime workers to produce that product, as well as our own students who are learning how to develop product schedules, costing analysis, and run small businesses. And so the casino gave us the opportunity to expand that portion of it, and we're looking toward further development as we open the doors to work with other restaurants in the area.
It is such a marvelous project in economic development, in education. It just fits the needs of our area. And as the tourism business has increased over the past several years, this will be a great asset to keep them here in Niagara just for another day, to be able to view this tremendous development in downtown Niagara Falls.
We had, and I'll stick this in there even though you might not like it, and you have to edit it later, but you know one of my biggest supporters was Joan. And so we're certainly sorry that she has passed away, but I have to bring up Joan's name every time we talk about the project. She was kind of there slapping me on the back, and when things got tough, she'd still slap harder and say, keep pushing. It was Joan, Marvin Maziarz, and Bob Sadeo. Somehow, in some way, the three musketeers, three very different people, as you know, but they were all integral, and Bob is still on the board. But the three of them were there even when it was really tough and people were saying this wasn't going to work. So those three people will always be a part of this.
Well, thank you. I know my wife Joan was very much supportive not only of you but of this project, because she felt it was the right thing at the right time at the right place in Niagara Falls. And she did take some hits from our friends in Lewiston who wanted it in Lewiston.
Right.
But she said, you have to have parking, you have to have the tourists, you have to have the right place, and I think you found that, and what a tremendous asset to our community. I want to thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Jerry.
I want to thank our listening audience for tuning in again to Target Success, to hear the successful developments of the new Culinary Arts Center and Hospitality Center in the city of Niagara Falls that is being run by Niagara County Community College. I want to thank Dr. Klyczek for being with us and look forward to seeing you again soon on Target Success.